Hello and welcome to LoveWorkLife Recruitment Academy. Welcome to this week's training course. Control and negotiation will be key in the new world of work. As everyone's sort of logging in, again, it's a very busy course. If you can just drop a quick note into the chat room or into the question and answer bar that you can hear me, that'd be much appreciated. And again, this course has been requested from last week, and a couple of weeks ago we started to people ask for requests. And when we sort of did last week's, what about headhunting? And the week before about building a desk. This has been requested with regards to control and negotiation on what they think is the most important part of recruitment coming up from the moment. So what I want to do, sort of as usual, go through a bit of a shout out for the people who are attending this week's webinar. So we've got people from Premier Engineering, we've got people from Cherry Professional, Recruitability, got people from PG Recruit, we've got people from Intro, we've got people at Medical Wing Locums, Impact Recruitment, May and Stevens, we've got G2 Group, TaylorMade, BombBomb, ARV Solutions, Cloudbase, TNN, we've got Premier IT, we have Degree 6, we have Hall Recruitment, we have JobWise, Star Recruitment, TTS 24/7, we have Prosper IS, we have Hall Recruitment, Aventus Legal, we have Change Recruitment Group, we have already mentioned Premier IT, and that's about everyone. So it's quite a solid base today. A lot of people, but a lot of people from lots of the same companies, which is very, very good. What's notable is being the amount of people that have talked to me sort of over the last couple of weeks about how busy they have started to become and the amount of grass shoots that are coming through, and about the things that we've done during lockdown with regards to training and how they're now implementing them and the sort of results they're getting. And the feedback I've been having from certain people is the results they're now getting because they are a little bit more controlled with their recruitment process has been very pleasing. So I'm pleased to hear that. So again, if people are sort of putting these things into practice and you find that you're having results, if you could drop those type of results down to me so I can have a look, that'd be very much appreciated. So let's kick off. So again, as always, we've got a big sort of hour to go through. So I always like to try keep it to an hour. So here we go. So today's objectives are going to be very, very simple when we look at what today's objectives. It is about control and negotiation. When I first wrote this course, and I'll be very honest, I probably wrote this course initially about 15 years ago. And then I've probably tailored it every 4 to 5 months throughout the last 15 years to where it is today. Now, I always looked at control negotiation as a recruiter when I was on the tools as how do I spend my time? And I always looked at my time and say, my time is a return on my investment. And I always worked out that if I wanted to earn X amount of £1,000 a year, then I'd work out what that would mean to me by the hour or by the minute. So it meant if I was wasting my time doing nothing, and sometimes you get into that sort of mindset where you just sort of bumble along for whatever it be, okay, then I knew how much money I was actually wasting by doing that. I then started to look at how I could work on my negotiation to make sure that I was controlling what I was doing for my clients to make sure that I wasn't wasting my time when engaging with clients and with candidates to that matter. So the objectives of the course are very, very simple. I want to make sure that we are all prepared for when the work starts to pick up, but not just when the work picks up, prepared now, before. So I want to really gain and preserving control throughout the recruitment process, to me, is an absolute must. I want to understand the importance of being in control. Why is it important that we're in control? Should we gain control and the questions that we should be asking to maintain control? I want to look at the warning signs so that your ROI is not shrinking. I want to look at gaining control when it's lost, and I want to negotiation to remain in control, and I want to know the difference between selling and negotiation. And there's a very big difference between selling and negotiation. And what we'll find if we start to implement all the things that we've talked about over the last 18 weeks, the difference between selling and negotiation is very important when we start to apply it. I want to look at what we prepare. and we'll have a brief conversation on features and benefits. So, why gaining and preserving control all the way through the recruitment process is a must. So, here's a quick question. I want you to sort of work out what you earned last year. And let's say last year, and I'm just going to use simple figures, so I'm just going to use 40,000, okay, divided by 220, which is the number of days of work in the year on average, which gives us £181 a day. So let's divide that by 8 for 8 hours in a day. So that's £22 an hour, basically, is what you are sort of earning and working out on that type of salary. Okay, so start to think, when you then start to farm yourself out to clients, how much you are worth when you're working for a client. Now, I always think, if I looked at that as my base rate, if I wanted to look at ×4, which is what I normally look at, I'm now working at £90 an hour, £100 an hour-ish. So you start to think, when you start to invest your time with your clients, if you're not getting £100 an hour worth of work and worth of commitment from your client, then what are you truly doing? So I start to think about what I want when I start to look at my client base and what's going on with my client base. So start to think, people always talk about controlling of the situation, managing the relationship, and why is it so important? And it's important for a very simple reason. You want to create an equal partnership where both parties understand the expectations required for a positive outcome. Both parties need to understand the commitment to the recruitment process. Now, we've talked an awful lot about what clients have started to do since lockdown and what clients are starting to look at. One of the main things clients want to do, they want to streamline their recruitment process, because nearly 98% of every client that was surveyed has said they want to reduce the cost of recruitment. And again, I'm going to stress that the cost of recruitment, that does not say they are wanting to reduce your fees or your rates. What they're saying is the total cost of recruitment is expensive for them. So they want to look at ways they can do that. The easiest thing they can look at, obviously, is your rates and your fees. However, if we're providing value, then what we'll find is that we protect our rates and fees. So to provide value, we've got to start to look at the things that clients truly want from a recruitment process. And it's quite interesting when we start to think about what clients want from a recruitment process and what clients came back and said that they believed were the top 10 things that they want to help them reduce their cost of recruitment. And the first one was their desire to create an efficient recruitment process. So if we have setting expectations with the client from day one, then we're going to set a really strong process. We need to take control of the process and own it. And you need to make sure that your recruitment process is fit for purpose. And that prevents hiccups. Because one of the things that clients said that they wanted from us was they wanted to recruit the first time, not the fastest time, the first time. So think, if you're having to rework a job because the client has said, oh, look at the candidates you've sent me, they haven't quite got the right skill set, but when you took the job specification, you didn't mention the skill set that you're talking about, then really, we haven't really got control of our recruitment process. So it's not fit for purpose, hence why we should be reviewing our process altogether. And if we get commitment from both sides, it prevents what I would always class as a client going rogue on you, not returning your calls, cancelling interviews, not giving you feedback, missing deadlines, etc. So control is really important. And without that control in the early parts of the recruitment cell, it means negotiation also becomes really hard and strained. So, why gain and preserve control all the way through the recruitment process is a must. And I always think that gaining control is part of the recruitment process. And when we start to evaluate why we haven't made a placement, we should start to think about what control that we had, but then start to think about the actual processes that we put in place in the recruitment structure? And do they actually provide us with more control or less control? Or does it become ambiguous because our recruitment stroke process isn't robust enough to actually move forward? So we need to start to think about gaining control. We need to start to think about why it's important for us to gain control in the first place. So we need to start to think about, if you don't want to lose face with a client, if you miss a deadline or you simply can't supply, then we've got to understand about honesty and integrity as a recruiter. Remember, we keep going about the word consultant, and it's made up of that two words, con and sult. If we are conning the client because we haven't got control, then we can't be consultative. And that's almost an insult to the client and an insult to yourself. So you want to create that equal partnership where both parties understand what's expectations for a positive outcome, and both parties need to understand the commitment to the recruitment process. So you need to demonstrate that you're not just out there pushing for a fee. You're not just out there pushing to be another recruiter that's going to, dare I say it, let them down in their recruitment process. So it's about spotlighting for you potential revenue to come from placements where you have total control. But it's about spotting the opportunity to say, actually, I'm working with a client that has no control over their recruitment process. Therefore, if I can take control, I can therefore reduce the cost of their recruitment process as well. So doing what you'll say you're going to do and never over-promising and under-delivering is really important. As I said, if you take control of that recruitment process, it does prevent hiccups. It prevents things going wrong. That lack of control demonstrates that you don't understand your own recruitment process. And if you don't understand your recruitment process, then how do you deliver on it? And sometimes it's not the lack of understanding. Sometimes it's the lack of trust in that recruitment process, because we keep saying that what we should be doing constantly is reviewing our process, reviewing our processes constantly to make sure that our processes are fit for purpose. And if we do that, then we start to understand where control from both sides is lacking and where we need to tighten up our recruitment process so the candidate gets a far better journey through the recruitment process, which means the client will have a far smoother journey, which again reduces their cost of recruitment. So committing both sides, okay, to prevent the client going rogue on you is really important. We've got to make sure that we actually commit the client fully before we start to work on it. And I always sort of think is, if I'm going to commit my time to work on a client, and I'm going to commit £100 an hour's worth of my time because that's what I'd charge if I was going out into the marketplace, then all of a sudden, that's what I need to do. So the more you charge, okay, the more commitment that you need. So the more commitment that you get, the less chance there are of the client going rogue. And again, it's back to that honesty and integrity approach with your client, where you're being authentic about what you're delivering to your client, and you're being honest about what your capabilities are of finding the candidate that they want, and being honest about what their opportunity is to actually get to the end of the process with the right product based on the material that you have at this moment in time. So being open with your client about your knowledge of the recruitment process, the knowledge of their process and how it's not working is really important. So we keep talking data. Your data will point to you where you're failing. It will also point to where your client is failing. If you can use that data properly and go back and regurgitate that data in a format that gives the client an idea of how to move their process forward in a more cost-effective way, then guess what? You start to create loyalty. You start to create trust, which starts to create that full commitment that we so desire from our client. So, how do we recognize control is lost or it starts slipping away? And this is very simple when we start to look at it. It's very simple indeed. It's understanding the importance of being in control and managing the client relationship. So, what do we think we start to identify the reasons why things are slipping away, things are going wrong, and we're not actually in control. My first signal, and when I speak to clients and I speak to candidates, consultants, and when I was a manager, sales director of big teams, these are things I would always look for. I'd be just sat in an office and I'd hear people, oh, that client stopped returning his calls or he's not answering his emails. To me, that wasn't a view that, oh, the client is ignoring them and ignoring their emails. It starts to say that the client is now taking control of the recruitment process and we lack control. And therefore, it is something that we need to address. If they've stopped returning your calls and answering your emails, the question is why? What else are they doing that's more important? Because to us, this is the most important thing. If it's not the most important thing to them, when we speak to them, then the chance of getting to the end of the recruitment process begins to reduce quite considerably. The client stopped giving you qualitative feedback. And what I mean by that is if you send a CV to a client and they give you scant information on why they don't want to interview that person, then you've got to start to think about why are they not giving you more information? Why are they not more invested in what is wrong with that candidate to give you a better opportunity of finding that person? If they send you a job spec and when you ask to actually readdress that job spec, again, by them not giving you qualitative feedback on that job spec and giving you more information, then all of a sudden you start to realize you probably haven't got the right information that you require to find the job, find the candidate to fill the job. Therefore, you're not in control. The client isn't in control either, although they generally tend to think that they are in control, but they're not, because all they're doing now is wasting their time, which again is costing them money and costing them productivity. So it's opportunity lost on both sides, and we've got to understand that and make the client understand that as well. So if the client starts to change the job specification or rejects candidates based on skills not asked for initially, we've got to start to think, does the client truly understand what they're looking for? And again, if they don't truly understand what they're looking for and they haven't got an understanding of their needs, then we've got to start to think about, why am I working on this job? Could I find a job that I'm more in control with a client that's more committed to me to actually work that role? So as I start to sort of work down this, I've got to start to think about what I'm actually working with the client, okay? The one thing that I really, really detested when I was a consultant was when the client started to renegotiate or they started to make unrealistic demands on me as a recruiter and of the candidate. And what I meant by that is I would never allow myself to knowingly start looking for that purple unicorn that clients want. I would go back with quantitative information about the marketplace, their competitors, of candidates in the marketplace, and the chance of realistically finding the type of candidate they wanted, either by a skill, by behavior, or by cost, etc., what they're looking for. So I'd start to look at that. If the client then starts to come back to me and start to renegotiate with me about my service or about my costs, then again, I'd be starting to worry about whether their commitment. So if they start to make unrealistic demands on me, I'd always start to sort of think about where the problem is lying. I'm not in control of this process. And if I'm not in control, then I've got to think about that. If a client threatens to pull a vacancy or put it out with other agencies without your knowledge, again, was always irksome to me. When I was working on jobs and I was working on jobs that was exclusive, if I saw it advertised with another agency, I would instantly call the client and I'd want to know why it was out with another agency. And if it was out with another agency, I'd want to know what the client's expectations were. If I hadn't put the right CVs across, I'd want to know if they've been rejecting CVs for spurious reasons, why that would be, etc. Then I'd start to understand the workings of the client and whether or not they were worth committing to or not. And generally at that point, I would make, and I was in the contract market at the time, I would tend to walk away from those type of clients because I knew full well that my opportunity of placing was starting to reduce and getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I would rather work with a client that was committed because I wanted to maximize my time in the office constantly. I'd also look at the candidates that I worked with. If candidates reject offers for reasons unknown to you that the client has tabled last minute during interviews, again, I would start to sort of wonder what my client is saying to my candidates during those interviews that is different to what I have been saying. So is there an actual mismatch in how I'm either selling the client, selling the position, selling the benefits, etc., of working for that client compared to when they actually get on site? So again, I start to look at those type of things, because if I don't understand what the client is truly offering and my candidates are then rejecting that, then again, I've got to start to think about what is happening and why those are happening. So when must you gain control with a client? Again, this was very, very simple to me, okay, and very easy. I always think, okay, if I wanted to take control, I had to take control instantly. And therefore, I would start to think, if I want to lock that client down and handcuff that client to me, it would be on that first call. That very first call, I'd be reconfirming things once the recruitment starts in earnest, constantly, based on the knowledge that I've taken from that client from that first call onwards. It's very rare that you call a client these days and pick up a job instantly straight away that you've never worked with before. You have to build that rapport, you have to build that knowledge, you have to build that understanding and that trust. Also, we know full well that, you know, if you just ring up out of the blue, the chance of them actually having a requirement on at that time, again, is very, very minimal. So I've got to start to think everything that I've worked with and everything I've understood all the way through the sales process up to the point of now getting a job and working that job, I need to be using as a hook and an anchor to tie that client down so I can control the client. It's really difficult and it's almost impossible to gain control if it's not been set from the start. If the client doesn't understand milestones, doesn't understand things that they need to achieve from there. So I need to start to think, I need to manage the expectations constantly of my client. And that starts right from that initial call. So I'd never underpromise and overdeliver. Always look at that. Underpromise and overdeliver is always the way. So I'd never look at it the other way around, which is overpromising and underdelivering, because when you start to do that, the client starts to lose trust in you, and therefore you instantly start to lose control. The quality of your service delivery from the start to the end of the process, control is gained and reconfirmed every time you deliver quality within the agreed timescales and beyond the expectations initially set. And I want you to think about that paragraph. I used to live by that paragraph. The quality of my service delivered from the start to the end of the process. So from the first initial call, the first initial time you've engaged with someone on LinkedIn, every call that you've had with them from since that point of time is all about the quality and service. Control is reconfirmed every time you deliver quality. So every time you pour something that is poor, every time you supply something, sorry, that is poor to a client, then control is lost a little bit because trust starts to wane a little bit. So we need to start to think constantly to gain control. It's all about the quality of the service that we give. And the quality of the service, the acid test and the simple acid test of our service is very simple. How easy do we make it for our client and our candidate to get through the recruitment process? And when we start to look at our job to placement conversion, we then start to see the quality that we are providing. Now, the UK National Quality Assessment is this. On perm, we place 2 out of every 10 jobs that we take on. Wow. 2 out of 10. So if you're working with a client and they've got 4 suppliers, okay, and you're placing 2 out of 10, then how many roles are we missing out on? So if we can place that to 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, then all of a sudden we're in a far better position. But think about that 2 out of 10 quote. 80% of your time is spent working on clients that are never ever going to take a candidate from you, or you have a little chance of getting a candidate over the line. Only 20% of the time that you work is actually earning you money. So we start to think now about controlling ourselves and taking control of our own destiny. If I'm allowing myself to work with clients that think that poorly of me, that I never get to the end of the process, then why am I working with that client? So it's not about just getting control of the clients, it's getting control of yourself. So if you're delivering exceptional service, then you need to start to think about whether your client is actually feeling the benefit of that or not. So we need to start to move on. We start to gain control right from the start, right from the very first time we pick up the phone to the client. The client answers the phone. What you can do from your first sentence to earn respect and control is really important. We need to be professional and we need to be consultative. We need to have confidence and convey that confidence to our clients. And we need to ensure that you get commitment throughout the process. I always set tests to measure my commitment all the way through. So if I ask them to send confirm on email, or if I ask them to say, can I have feedback on this type of date, I would set those things, and constantly I would measure my success by that. So if I said I was going to call at 11 o'clock, I would call at 11 o'clock. If they weren't there at 11 o'clock, then I'd be questioning what was going on. So I do not understand those sort of things. I would set the right precedent all the way through. And whatever precedent you set at the beginning of the relationship will become the expectations and the assumptions of the norm of your service. So if you set high precedent on yourself and set high expectations of what you are going to deliver, then all of a sudden, that's what they're expecting. So that means you have to deliver. But if you push those expectations to them as well, then you're also in the right move. So being consultative and advise your client of the benefits to them of following a particular process is going to be really important. And again, we're then back to don't overpromise and underdeliver. So be honest and upfront with the client is something that you need to start to think about. Asking awkward questions are, again, something that you need to think about. So control from the onset is really important. Start as you mean to go on. Set the right precedent early on. And I mean very early on. Set the right precedent. If you say you're going to do it, do it. So know your market, skills and competitors. Demonstrate your professional standing in the community. I've talked an awful lot about extracting data from your CRM, extracting data from candidates, extracting data from other clients. If you can go on and demonstrate that you have a really good understanding, and I mean a really good understanding of your marketplace. I used to say to my clients, and I worked in a very small niche market in IT, if my candidate coughed on site, I could feel it. And if I could feel my candidate coughing, I can feel every other candidate on that site coughing as well. And I used to know my candidates inside out, my marketplace. And so if they said, oh, I'm just interviewing somebody from so-and-so client, I'd more than likely know who that candidate was. So I could talk to the client about my knowledge of my marketplace, which led them to understand that I controlled the candidate marketplace because I knew everybody. So I'd always be there talking to candidates, understanding what they want, and then using that knowledge to demonstrate my professional standing in the community to drive forward. I would never, ever overpromise because it always leads to delivery. So I was always absolutely blunt with my clients about their expectations of filling the role. And I mean, I was very blunt. If I couldn't deliver what my client wanted, I would tell them that I couldn't do that. But I would look for alternatives, alternative solutions. What else could I provide and why could I provide that? If you think about what the market is like now, how inundated the clients are going to get with agencies, with candidates applying directly to clients, they're going to be inundated. We were on a call yesterday with a guy called Paul Sharp, and he said there was a client in Manchester that put an advert out and had over 1,000 applications. Wow. How are they going to go through all of those applications to see that one position? So although at the moment we might be slightly behind the curve because the client might be out there finding direct candidates, they can't do it for long. So we need to start to look for ways that we can do that. Another thing that I was always confident about was my ability. And knowing my product and my marketplace demonstrated my confidence within my ability. And I always looked at that and said, if I could find people straight away, I would tell them, and I'd tell them what was going on. So when selling my solution, I was always confident of what my solution would be and how I was going to drive my solution to them. But I was also interested in them. My solution was not based on the usual features, advantages, and benefits, which we're going to talk about at the end. What my solution was based on was first establishing their problem, what their problem was. And if I could establish their problem and understand what their problem was, then I could start using features, advantages, and benefits of my service to actually fulfill that need, cure their problem. Too many consultants in the recruitment market go on and they're selling brilliantly their features, advantages, and benefits, but they're not attaching it to a problem that the client has. And by not attaching it to the problem that the client has, it doesn't become personal to the client. So again, if it's not personal to the client, then they're not bothered about it. If they're not bothered about it, there is no control in place. If there's no control in place, guess what? We're not going to get to the end of the market. We're not going to get to the finishing line and actually place that candidate, because they'll be going out to all and sundry to try get that. So getting commitment early is really important, and getting confirmation of the client's commitment throughout is really interesting. So listen to what they say when they speak to you on the phone. Watch the emails as they come in. Do they pick up your emails on time? Do they respond when you need to respond? When you first took that job spec and you asked them to book interview dates, did they do that? Did they do those things? Okay. You need to think, by achieving your goals and setting a firm client expectations, okay, then you will get your goals. You need to set the rules out of where the boundaries are and what you're expecting. Because again, what we talk about is, if your boundaries are not important to you, then they won't be important to the client. If they're not important to the client, then those boundaries and those goals that you have become impotent. And once something is impotent, no one really wants to deal with it. No one wants to get to the end of it. It becomes a goal that's just never going to be achieved. So we've got to make sure we set our goals and they're important to you and the client. Always send confirmation of yours and your client's commitment. So again, verbal commitment is great, but if you get commitment and you write it down and you send it back to the client, and the client confirms that commitment back to you in writing, so feedback times, interview dates, offer procedure, etc., etc., then the client's expectations have now been set of what you're going to deliver. That means now you are ready to go away and deliver. You feel that expectation. So asking the questions that need to be asked, those really hard questions, the questions that a lot of average recruiters shy away from, they're the questions that turn you from being a consultant into being a consultative recruitment person. If you become truly consultative, then you have that choice when you start to work with a client to either walk away or stay engaged. So you can choose to walk away or not. But as a consultant, you generally stay engaged. And because you're conning the client, you're also conning yourself, because you haven't got commitment. Hence why we're only at 2 out of 10 on average of the placements that we make. And I always say, make yourself available 24/7 to a client to demonstrate your commitment. And it was really interesting. I was working with an agency a number of years ago, and one of their consultants came to me and they said, look, we're all going out tonight. I've got this client here. The client is a real pain, and I know full well what the client's going to do. We're trying to work with them exclusively. He's going to send me a job specification tonight because he knows we're out, and he knows he's going to send me a job specification. So I said, if that's the case, and you've got a very good idea of what that job is, have candidates ready. Get those candidates ready. Let's put the clients to the test. Interesting. He rang me up the following day and said it was 11:05 at night. They were still in a pub somewhere. And the client sent through an email requesting XYZ type of candidates. At 11:30, the client had 4 CVs sat in his inbox with a question mark saying, when do you want me to set up the interview dates? Really interesting. The client then didn't come back for 4 days. It was interesting to see the lack of the commitment that the client had, and we nailed the job spec and we nailed the candidates to the client. Okay, so it demonstrated full commitment. We knew 24/7 that we could supply that client at any time better than any other agency, but how much commitment was the client to us? Tested our commitment, we answered his commitment, and he still wouldn't commit fully. Over the time, he did, and he became a really, really great client, but it took time to break those barriers down. So making yourself available is really important to your client and to the outcome of your client. I always think you've got the basic job spec. You now need to ask questions to gain control, okay? So once you have a job spec from a client, or they're willing to give you a job spec, you basically have the client where you want them. But before you engage with them, there are key questions you should be asking when qualifying the vacancy to prevent the loss of control. And this to me is, if we haven't gained it already, this is the next place where we should be looking to gain control. But if we don't gain control, then quite seriously, we're in problems. So we've got to start to look at gain control here and driving through at the job spec, okay? So I always think, when I start to break down the questions of what we're asking to gain control, consultants start to understand there's a different side to just taking a job specification and maybe padding it out a little bit or making it a little bit more robust. It's about what they're going to do with that job. So questions early on that I'm always looking for, and I always ask these questions. So look for your key skills, and I look for what I could trade with experience or behaviors, because sometimes the key skills aren't available, but would they trade it for experience? Because remember, experience and behaviors are something that we can't train, but skills can be. So could I trade it from there? How quickly do they need this person? You know, what is a genuine reason why they need this person? How quickly do they need this person? What is the problem if this person doesn't come? So I'm now looking for problems. What happens if they can't get that person in that timescale? What's going to happen to them personally? How does it affect them personally? How does it affect the business? I want to know that, because again, that builds the pressure on their problem. And again, what I'm looking for constantly is areas that I can then find the problem, reestablish that problem, and then give my features and benefits, advantages and benefits that cure that problem. I want to look at their interview process. I want to look at their interview process because I want to know why it's not working. I want to book times in the diary for the first and second interview. Too many times I hear clients say, I keep losing candidates because I'm not quick enough in the marketplace. Now that's going to change, because there's lots of candidates in the marketplace, but there's going to be also lots of clients looking for those type of candidates. So the same thing is going to happen. It will only take a short period of time for the really good candidates to disappear off the good marketplace, and then you're left with all the poor candidates. So what do we do with them? So again, it's going to go back very quickly to where it was. It's about speed, but it's not about the fastest past the post. It's the best candidate past the post in the best time. So the client to place the person first time. So getting the information on our job spec is really important. I want to arrange a callback for 2 days time after I've taken that initial job spec, so I can go back and give them a progress report on what's going on, review CVs that I may have submitted. I want to understand what review that I've got. I want to understand at this moment in time if there's pressure on time to get a candidate in. Will they take a temp? Will they take a contractor whilst we find the right permanent person at this moment in time? If they have a shortfall, have they made people redundant? If they have, but they now realize that they've cut too deep too quickly, candidates from a contract or a temp market could fill those positions. So have we got those on our books? Can we fill them? Does the client understand what that is about? I also want to know how many CVs the client has already seen and how many interviews they've done. Because again, that starts to go back to their recruitment process. Is it efficient? And bearing in mind, the number one thing that clients told me out of the hundreds that we reviewed was they have the desire to make their recruitment process more efficient. And we know as recruiters that these areas that they work in are very inefficient. Their feedback is very inefficient. The time it takes to feedback on CVs and interviews, etc., is very inefficient. The quality of the comments that come back to it is inefficient, etc., etc., etc. If the role's been out for a long time, I want to know why they've not filled it. And I want to know if there's anything they have told me that will help me find the most suitable candidate. I want to push for that extra piece of information. But what I find, though, quite often is that clients don't respond. And when they're not responding, to me, that is a huge warning sign. A huge warning sign that I've lost control. Things are not going to plan. The client is not committed. So I need to start to take control back. To me, this is now a really big warning sign that my return on investment is shrinking fast. So if clients aren't returning my call, I want to know why the clients aren't returning my call. I want to know why a client rejects perfectly good candidates for no reason. I want to know that. I'm going to go back and I'm going to challenge that. I want to know if there's that sudden change in the job specification, why that sudden change has happened. Is it something that I should have known about, or is it something that has just come around the corner? If I see other advertising a position that I believe I've got exclusively, or I know I'm only working with another 3 agencies, and all of a sudden a 4th or a 5th and a 6th agencies appeared, I want to know why the client is panicking. What's the client's problems? What's going on? So I need to understand all of those things, because this is all a pure sign that my opportunity to make the placement is shrinking. And so my investment in my time is now becoming critical. Am I going to lose my investment? Because you can never get your time back. So am I going to lose my investment? I want to think every candidate you speak to who knows about the position already means that this position has been out for quite some time. Has the client told me the truth? Is the client being open and honest with me? What's going on? So I've got to start to think, if my return on investment is slipping, I've got to address the problem straight away. I've got to start to regain control, okay? And regain control, it's not impossible. It's a warning sign. A warning sign, it's a cry for help. But who needs the help? Is it you, or is it the client that needs the help? And this is the interesting part. When I start to listen and sit in a recruitment office, I can see consultants instantly who have lost control and who aren't looking to even regain control, but are happily working away on certain requirements, and all you can see is the money dripping out of their pocket as they walk to lunch. You can see the pound notes falling on the floor because they haven't got control. They haven't locked it down. So as soon as your client misses a deadline, you need to address it. You need to address it properly. Go to the client and have a conversation about what's going on. And yes, there may be legitimate reasons why they've missed that deadline, but you understanding those legitimate reasons puts you in another position. Them having a reason that isn't legitimate just doesn't make sense. So we need to make sure that if they're missing a deadline, they have a true reason why, and we address it, and then we reconfirm. Sometimes, how often as a recruiter are you working a job? Should you go speak to your manager and say, look, I'm flogging a dead horse here? How often does your manager say you need to move on, but you completely refuse to move on because you're so tied up in the emotional commitment that you've put forward to place that job, rather than cutting your losses straight away? If you have to cut your losses and you're flogging a dead horse, cut the client loose, cut the job loose, do something different. It's a lot easier. Have a plan of what you want from this call when you make the call. So when you call your client and then you speak to your manager, you need to know whether you're walking away or carrying on. If you're carrying on, what does that look like? If you're walking away, what does that look like? So make sure you plan those things honestly. Okay, be honest, but never aggressive with it. But be confident and professional with a client when you go back and have this conversation, it is genuinely about being consultative and not being aggressive. But it's also about being honest. If the client's doing things that is going to be detrimental to their opportunity to make a replacement, then you need to tell the client. So you need to state facts to the client from your point of view. And stating facts means that you're using the market information that you've gleaned from the market and what's happened to other clients who've done a similar sort of thing that your client's now doing, and why they haven't made placements because of that, and why they start to lose quality candidates in the marketplace. I always think I'm an incessant writer. So if anyone who meets me and knows me, I will have a book. I'll write lots and lots of notes down. If I meet you for a meeting and I bring my laptop, I'll be constantly typing notes on my laptop as I'm talking to you and what have you. Okay, so I keep constant notes. Why do I keep constant notes? Because I want to go back and refer to those things. Those who work with me, they said it was quite interesting that I would interview people and they'd say, God, 4 years later, you'd be talking to me about something and you'd bring a fact out. The fact that I'm bringing out is that I've probably gone back and keep reading, going over my notes and rereading my notes about certain things, because certain things trigger memories and go, that was in so-and-so, so-and-so. I'll go back and read the notes. And I go back because I've made those notes, then I use those notes. So using notes and putting them on your CRM are really important. Every note I make when I speak to a client goes on my CRM. So next time I speak to them, I know what I'm talking about. I'm also very honest about, if it's my fault, I'm going to admit it and I'm going to propose a remedy straight away. I'm never going to just blame the client. I'm going to look at, if there is blame to be made, okay, how do I remedy that situation? So I always have a number of solutions prepared, ready to roll out to my client, okay? And one of those solutions is walk away. Do not underestimate the power of walking away. I worked with a guy in Nottingham placing low-end PC support people. He was billing about 450 to 500 grand a year on an average fee of between 3 and 5 grand. Most fees around about 3.5 grand. Wow, making lots of placements. But he would absolutely only ever work with a client that was truly committed to him, and he would walk away constantly. He would have lots of solutions for those clients, and if they didn't want to buy those solutions, he wouldn't work with them. And that time he maximized. He would fill out of 7 or 8 out of 10 placements that he took on. Wow, far better, far more functional. Remind them of the process that you agreed initially and why it's important to keep the communication flow going if the communication stops and that flow stops happening, because that is when communication breaks down. That's when the requirement starts to break down. Get the client to reconfirm his commitments or her commitments and email them again. Face-to-face or now via video is always better, okay? And after speaking with your manager, take advice, walk away or carry on. So, you'll have to negotiate to remain in control. Negotiation is really important. When will you, and for what reason, will you have to negotiate? So clients, candidates up their demands, more money, more holidays, more training. The recruitment process is something to negotiate on. Booking interviews is something to negotiate on. Agreeing feedback and dates is something to negotiate on. Your terms and conditions are something to negotiate on. Do not underestimate sending out your terms and conditions and working to them. Training for candidates is really important. So negotiation is the key to everything. So if we start to look at what we negotiate on and why we start to negotiate, we've got to understand the difference between negotiation and selling. So negotiation is very, very straightforward to me. It's a very, very thing. So what is the difference between selling and negotiation? And this is where lots of consultants, again, start to break down with regards to what's the difference, and what they get into is the difference between getting a really good commitment and not. And that the difference is broken down in this style. So, the difference between negotiation and selling. You should always be closing when speaking to a client. You need to identify what the client is seeking so that you can match it against your recruitment service. So negotiation of a fee, etc., will take place at the end and have more commitment because it's easy to negotiate. So the fundamental difference between selling and negotiation is that selling is a process to identify the fit between what the seller is offering and what the buyer seeks. So what you are offering and what the buyer seeks. Negotiation is the process of agreeing the terms of the deal and is part of the selling continuum. Yet the negotiation should only begin when there is a genuine commitment from the buyer and the seller towards the conditional sale. And what that actually says is that if you've done the first part, the selling part, and you have identified a match and a fit between what you're selling and what the buyer needs, then when you negotiate the price, it's so different. But what we tend to do is mix this all up. We tend to try and negotiate without understanding what the actual buyer truly needs, because we think they just need our recruitment service when actually there's something bigger that they should be needing. So we think about that negotiation. It's a fundamental flaw in our recruitment sale and where things go wrong. So, negotiation. What is negotiation and what is selling? So as we start to think about this in a bigger term, negotiation, okay, and how we negotiate is really important. So when we start to negotiate, we start to look at our sale. We have a plan and know what you have to play with in your plan. So you know your product, you know your marketplace, you know your service, you know your walkaway points, you know exactly what you have to play with, and you stick by those rules. You do not bend those rules, okay? Because once you start to bend your rules, then you start to degrade your service. Don't give everything away in one go. We need to trade things. So if you come in and say, I want 20% for this, and the client says 15%, do not stand there, put your thumbs in the side of your pants and pull them straight down to your ankles and go, fair enough, Mr. Client, that's what I'll do. No. If you have to give something away, you need to find out what it is that the client or why the client wants to reduce to that much. And them saying, because all your competitors do that, is not an answer. That's a cop-out. So we need to negotiate and negotiate hard. So if I'm going to give something away, I want something back in return. I can't do 15%, Mr. Client, but I tell you what, I can do 18%. But if to do it 18%, you're going to have to give me this job exclusively, or you're going to have to give me this, or you're going to have to give me that. I am going to trade my negotiable variables constantly. I want to assess my client's feelings. Again, this is about negotiation, but this is the selling part. We start to think about how does the client feel once we've delivered that negotiation. Do they feel happy? Do they feel they've got something really good? Or are they walking out feeling like they've just been ripped off? Or they feel like they've been held over a barrel, or whatever it be that they feel. You've got to think, do they feel a win-win situation? Because if they don't feel a win-win situation, you're never going to get a win-win situation. So we need to set the client expectations. If you know your product and pricing, you must be able to justify it. And market intelligence is the key. So if you're going to go in and quote a huge fee compared to your competitors, have a reason why you're quoting that fee. And if you can work and say, Mr. Client, looking at the requirements that I filled in this environment, I've filled over this year, I've taken on 100 jobs in this marketplace and I filled 90 of them. It gives the client a really good warm glow. It's market intelligence, okay? We need to understand what's going on. So be able to justify your prices. It's not just that is my price. Why can you justify that price? Look for alternatives to trade, okay? If you need to look for alternatives, okay? Don't underpromise, or underpromise, but not by too much, okay? So you don't want to underpromise so much that your product looks cheap. So underpromise slightly, but not by too much. At the end of the negotiation, clarity is a must. Everyone must understand where they are. So we need to start to think about preparing then for this negotiation. In the negotiation, we need to create that plan, okay, to prepare. Okay, we need to know the boundaries of what you're offering. Now, some clients will tell you that, you know, or some agencies that you work for will have boundaries on fees, etc., etc. Okay, know where your boundaries are. If your boundary is 15%, don't start at 15%. Go high. You can only get lower. Okay, if you start low, you certainly can't get higher. You need to know your features and benefits and advantages of your service so you can justify your service. But remember, if you're looking for the problem first, then matching your features, benefits, advantages to the solution of their problem means justification becomes so much easier, because you're not justifying something theoretically, you're justifying something that is emotionally attached to that client, becomes a far deeper sell. Okay? Know what a win-win solution looks like for our client and for your candidates. So again, that win-win solution is, how does your client feel at the end of that negotiation? Do they feel they've got a good deal? Do they feel that they've got something that's going to be different to what they've ever had before, and they're going to get to the end with a great product? Understanding what motivates your client and candidates to that win-win is really important. And that again links back to the problem with your client, and again, why candidates leave their current employer. What motivates the move? Why are they needing that? What motivated the placement, the opening, and the requirement in the first place? How can you cure that? I've said we know what will make our candidates and clients happy, and we should know what should give away to you that is inexpensive but might appear expensive to the client. And this is when we go back to our data comments. We're getting data every single day, every single moment. Every time we speak to a candidate, every time a CV crosses our board, we're getting data. And if we can extract that data and put it into a usable format, it's inexpensive. It's coming to us constantly. But to a client, it's liquid gold, because it gives a client an understanding of the marketplace and what they can do with it. So to them, that's a great thing. Why do you think when we write white papers, clients are all over that? We do all sorts of things here about writing white papers, giving them out, okay, and it's interesting the amount of clients that come onto our website to try take away that information and take about that white paper. It's interesting, after these webinars on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays that we deliver, how many clients then come onto our website trying to understand or get another view of that webinar for that information, because we're giving away something that's inexpensive but expensive to other people. So it's driving that information constantly all the time. We get this data, let's use the data. Prepare for objections and have solutions. So understand your feel, felt, found. And remember, you are the expert. You are the expert. So your knowledge, and use your knowledge to your advantage. And I keep saying this. How many times have we sat here and let's look at this meeting here. It's a meeting about how we're going to sell to a client. But guess what? There is no client involved in this meeting. However, when I wrote these courses, guess what I did? I went out and spoke to clients to understand what the client knows about negotiation and selling. And so some of the things that I've added in are what the clients have told me what they're looking for. So remember, you're the expert, so use your knowledge. And this all boils down to one thing: preparation. The 5 Ps. There is 6 depending on the profanity of your office. Okay, proper planning prevents poor performance. So confidence, to aim high and not crumble. If you're confident in your sale and you plan your sale properly, then when you go in high and you don't crumble, you can walk away with pride, or you get a far better deal than you started to go in with. If you go in and sound more professional, you will come out with a far better result. It instills confidence in your client if you act in that way. So remember, if the client's using certain terminology, you should use certain terminology, the same terminology. If you sound confident and you have quantifiable evidence of your capability, it will enable you to stand your ground. And if you can stand your ground and you know the client's going to walk, you're going to walk away from the client guess what? The client will come back, and I'll go back to my man in Nottingham. How many clients rang him up 3 months, 2 months later and said, do you know what? You're right. I couldn't find that person on the way here. I'm happy to work with you now exclusively. Bang. And guess what? He'd fill the job. Influences your ability to ask what you want rather than what you need or walk away. So if you're prepared and you know your boundaries, then it influences your ability to ask for what you want. And that is really important. Because remember, it's what you want. Do you want to waste your time during the day or not? Confidence to target a high price. I always say, if you don't ask, you don't get. But if you can actually back up with evidence why you command such a high price, why is it different, then you can start to see that. And think about buying a car. You can go buy a Lada, or I'll change that. You can go buy a Skoda, okay? And the Skoda is always seen in the UK as a inferior car. You can go buy an Audi or a Volkswagen, and they're seen as a more superior car. And yet they're made in the same factories. They're made by the same company. So it's confidence in how they target the Audi compared to the Skoda, okay, creates a price. It's professional to settle your negotiation with the client before working the role. Everyone knows where they stand. So get your terms and conditions out. So very quickly, as we're sort of just hitting the hour mark now, okay, we need to start to think about selling benefits, matching your benefits. We've talked an awful lot about this. Your aim is to help get what they want. Tailor your offering and make it unique. Value goes both ways. The client needs to understand the benefits of working with you as well as you working with the client. Give live examples of where you've added value to others and link it back to your client's needs when selling benefits. Trial close constantly. Offer alternatives one at a time, okay? And ask for the business and then be quiet. Stay silent until the client speaks, otherwise it shows you're not confident in your price and they will negotiate you down. So to conclude, very simple. The conclusion is all about control helps to create an equal partnership. We can now recognize when control is lost. You must gain control from the start, and you must understand what gaining control and increasing the chance of placements are by having that control. You now understand the importance of asking the right questions when taking a job specification in order to remain in control, not just your normal job specifications. You now understand things that will not go to plan unless you control the situation at all times. So when you say things haven't gone to plan, the first question I would ask as your manager would be, well, what plan did you have in the first place? And generally, I get a blank look when I ask that question because they haven't had a plan in the first place. They've just played it by ear and hope something's going to happen, okay? Once in control, or once control is lost, we must work to regain control again. Therefore, negotiation is a must, and renegotiation is even a bigger must. We understand that the difference between selling and negotiation and the difference it actually makes. So understand when you're selling, get your selling right, and then it makes negotiation so much simpler. So separate the two out when you're doing your sale at the end to understand what the difference between negotiation and selling truly is. And we need to plan and prepare to negotiate. So again, it's all in that preparation of what we're doing and where we're going. And if we know our features and benefits, then it becomes really simple. Control and negotiation. So I'd always say as we come to the end of this course, or the end of this hour, this webinar, control and negotiation is down to you, and it's down to how you value yourself. If you're sat there hiding behind a poorly qualified job, and 99% of the time you know when you're doing that, then you're just wasting your time. you have no control over you, and you have no control over your client. So initially, you've got to start to think about controlling your own urge. Think about walking away from poorly qualified roles and doing the right thing, and then driving yourself into a marketplace that values your service. And once you get valued and you get control and commitment, you will start to make more placements. If you go back and look at your placement average over the last 12 months and you're on 2 out of 10, it says that you're not controlling enough. It says that you are not engaging with your clients properly. They do not value your service. 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10, it's starting to increase. Okay. Once you get above 5 to 6 out of 10, then all of a sudden you're starting to see a huge difference. And if you start to think, if on average you take 10 requirements a month and you're placing 6 of those, then you're in a really good position. If you're taking 30 requirements a month, okay, you've got to start to think about your average fees and what's going on, because you're placing 6 then, it might sound good, but you're still now back at your 2 out of 10. So you've got to think about you and putting your own time in. So that's the end of today's session. Thank you very much. Sorry for being 6 minutes over time. I hope I've not eaten too much into your sales time this afternoon. If you have any questions, feel free to drop any questions down. As always, if there's a course that you want, or is there something that you want to re-go over that we haven't done or we have done in the past, feel free to drop me a line at any time during the week. As I say, 3 clients asked me for this type of course last week, so feel free to look at what you want and then come and ask me for that. And if I can supply that, I will absolutely supply that to you. So ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. I hope you have a super day. As always, it's Wednesday, hump day. So have a great finish to the week, and I will speak to you next week. Thank you.